Hey everyone, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, good afternoon, good morning, or good night. Hey, it's Phil Gervashek, and I'm just wondering, have you ever wondered what the heck combo prospecting is? Well, the good news is I've got the author of the book of the same name, Combo Prospecting, on with me tonight. It's Tony Hughes. He's got 30 years of corporate and sales leadership experience. He's generated record-breaking personal and team sales results. He's an experienced CEO and a sales team leader, and he's also the best-selling author and the most read person in LinkedIn on the topic of B2B sales leadership. He's got more than 500,000 followers on his blogs, and this recent book, like I mentioned, Combo Prospecting, has been published by HarperCollins and the American Management Association. So tonight we're going to talk about combo prospecting. We're going to talk about sales leadership, and all sorts of other good stuff with Tony. So what's up, Tony? How are you, buddy?
Hey, Phil, how are you? Thanks for having me on the Facebook show, and also this will be put out as a podcast. So really looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. I am too. So I followed your work for a while. And first thing I got to ask, because not everybody knows, and so this for the 17 people that don't know you, what the heck is combo prospecting, Tony, and how'd you come up with this?
Well, combo prospecting was the result of trying to solve what I think is the number one problem for salespeople globally. You know, most people in sales think that they know how to sell. They'll sometimes say that, you know, the biggest problem is closing. The reality is that opening is really binary. If you don't open well, you don't get to close. But the number one problem people really have is they don't have enough quality sales pipeline. And whether it's because people have bought into the social selling snake oil and schlock around go hyper passive and all these leads will come to you, or whether it's people just treat the phone like it's covered in spiders like they always have because we always fear rejection, whether it's either of those two things, the reality is people are just not creating enough pipe. And if you've got quality pipeline, it de-stresses your role, it makes forecasting more predictable, you're not doing unnatural acts, and the process of closing becomes easier because you're living within the law of non-desperation, right? So, but what I discovered was that one of the reasons people struggle with pipeline is buyers out there are themselves facing a white wall of noise. They're getting bombarded, and they're just conditioned to ignore anybody they don't know and to ignore anybody that they feel is trying to market or sell to them. So what we've got to do is pattern interrupt people's propensity to ignore. And that's really what birthed the concept of combo prospecting. I didn't really invent the idea, but I certainly A/B tested a lot of things and worked with many people to try and crack the code on this.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, people that, and it's been forever that we've said that people know from who we buy, like, and trust. So if that's the case, right, we can't just expect that a cold call is going to get us through all by itself, right? We have to kind of hit them with a 1-2 punch here. So social selling by itself doesn't sell. Just a cold call doesn't sell. So talk us through this, Tony. Like, you talk about pattern interrupt. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, Phil, let me just back up a little bit because you made a really important point, and it's true. People do want to buy from those they feel they know, like, and trust. But here's the reality today. For somebody worth getting to for us as a salesperson, not one of those people, not one on the face of the planet, is lonely and bored and looking for a new friend in business. They're busy, they're stressed, they want to get home to their families, and the way they feel is that if they need a problem solved, they'll go reach out within their own trusted network, and they'll go contact people if they want to have a conversation. So if you as a seller want to be able to interrupt someone's day and start a conversation, you've got to do it with context. So the reality is we need to lead by providing value in conversations well in advance of trying to talk about the value from buying our product, service, or solution. So the first rule of combo is you have to nail your narrative. If you've got a conversation, talk track, narrative, value prop that's all about you and it's not about them and their opportunity for better results, you're already in deep trouble, because nobody cares about it. I've had other people on the show talk about that, and it's bang on. So the first rule of combo is create the right narrative, then find ways to break through.
Okay, so create the right narrative, right? That's preparing to have that conversation, writing that up, and practicing it over and over again so that it really is crisp in the buyer's give a crap lane, right? That's important to note. It is not
exactly
about me, right? It's not about, so, hey, did I mention I'm a really great seller and my product is really good? And, I think you should buy because we have exemplary service, right? That's the wrong way to sell, right, Tony?
Yeah, exactly. You've got to talk about them and their results. So if I was selling to a sales leader in the B2B world in tech sales, and they said, "What do you do, Tony?" I'd say, "Well, I work with leaders in tech sales to help them get more of their salespeople hitting quota, and so they can provide a forecast to their boss that the boss actually believes. When can we find 20 minutes to have a conversation?" That's it.
Wow.
I don't talk about my book, my IP, my sales methodologies, my way of managing the complex sale, my way of building sales pipeline, my negotiation course, my keynotes. I stay away from all of that because nobody wants to know about that until they first believe that you can help them solve a serious problem they've got. And for everybody watching this and listening to this, one of the other laws of sales is that the size of the sale is directly related to the size of the problem that we solve. So unless we're solving a serious problem, there is no decent sale for us. So we've got to get laser focused on what the potential client's business case for change is. Some people call it the commercial value of change, because unless there's a significant reward, the truth is most people see change as just a whole lot of work and risk. And that's one of the reasons we've got to monitor trigger events, right? So we've got to go and find new senior people into roles that have been hired to change things up, that are looking for an early win for their boss. And if you can combine that with a referral, then you're now leveraging the fastest path and the highest probability to a sale, right? So trigger events give context, referrals give trust, and that's where social can be really powerful. So rather than narcissistically blasting and spamming and gazing into the mirror of our personal brand in social media, the most powerful thing to do is to monitor for trigger events and go and find the nodes in the network that can give you some kind of warm introduction or help you with your research.
Wow. I really like that. So we solve a big problem. That's great. That's fundamental. We have to do that, and we have to be able to articulate that, and that's your story here. And then we've got to find that trigger event, right? Because timing is a lot of sales. We just got to be honest about that. And then from there, then we have to leverage trust, right? So we have to find someone that trusts us, that trusts the other person as well, that can then make that connection and bridge that trust bridge. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Because, I know Mike Weinberg well, right? But let's imagine that I don't know Mike Weinberg. You've interviewed him on your show. I just think he's an absolute legend. But if I didn't know Mike and I found that, you're a common connection for us, and I said to you, "Hey, Phil, I'm wanting to get a conversation with Mike." Now, here's the thing. Most people say, "Hey, Phil, would you mind sending an introduction?" I don't do that because you've lost control. What I would just say is, "Hey, Phil, do you mind if I mentioned that you thought it would be a good idea for me and Mike to talk?" And then I would just go ahead and run combos at Mike. I'd reach out to him in LinkedIn. I'd send him an email. I'd call him, leave a voicemail, and it'd be really simple. "Hey, Mike, Phil thinks it makes sense that you and I have a conversation. I've got some ideas on how you could. When can we find 20 minutes?" Right? So it's really that simple. So that's where social is really, really powerful.
Yeah. So how do you know though that I know Mike? Other than, obviously Mike's on my show. That's different. But let's pretend it's somebody that hasn't been on my show. How do you know that it's a real warm connection instead of just somebody who's just adding numbers to their network?
Yeah, so, well, everybody's different, right? So I teach social selling. So I'm going to say a lot of things that sound like I'm against social selling, but I'm actually a big fan. I've managed to build a huge following. I get more business come to me than I can cope with. I give business away to people in my network without taking referral fees or commissions. I think that compromises me, actually providing a referral. So I'm a big fan, but the reality is, if you look at me, I've got, as we record this, I think about 320,000 followers in LinkedIn, about 20,000 first-degree connections. People often contact me and say, "Hey, Tony, I can see that you're a first-degree connection of this person. We're thinking of hiring them. What's your off-the-record confidential advice?" And more times than not, I don't know the person at all. They're just following me. But for many people on LinkedIn, they just connect to people that they know. They connect to people they have relationships with. So often what you'll find, if there's a common connection, they do actually know the person. They can give you some advice and guidance. And I've rung people in the past and they've said, "Actually, do you know what? I'm catching up for a beer with this person on Friday night after work. Why don't you come along and I'll introduce you?" I've had that happen on 3 occasions. So it's incredibly powerful. So looking for common connections in LinkedIn, having a look at what's going on in groups. It's timelessly true that The quality of conversations all depends on research. Your probability of winning often depends on the level of research that you do. And you made a comment before that, there's only a small percentage of people that are in the buying window, and it's typically about 3% at any given time will be in the buying window for what you do. But strategic selling, by definition, means engaging early at senior levels and actually creating the business case with them, for them, in a way that hardwires bias toward you, that's in their best interest. So if you're not, engaging early and creating awareness of opportunity for better results or solving problems, you're not really selling strategically at all anyway. So it's really important we just find a way to engage with senior people.
Yeah, and the more senior and the bigger problem, of course, the better it is, because the lower down we connect, the less likely they're even aware of the strategic initiatives in an organization, and the more likely they're just trying to put out a little fire, right, a little grease fire, as opposed to the whole organization potentially catastrophically being on fire, which is far worse and far more valuable.
Yeah, and the other problem with engaging in the lower parts of the organization is what will often happen is that the person we engage with ends up in a relatively short period of time becoming a blocker, where they don't want us to get to senior people above them. They say they'll carry the message upline. And as much as, there's a reputation for salespeople that salespeople can be untruthful, my experience is that buyers lie a heck of a lot more than salespeople do. And often it's inadvertent, but, they'll say they have authority, and often, oh yeah, I've got the budget, I'm making the decision. And the truth is, well, you might have a budget, but you sure as hell don't have approval to spend it. Although you've got a budget, you've got to go and resubmit the business case to some kind of executive committee. They then will weigh up whether they want to do your initiative or other initiatives or priorities that there are inside the organization. So often, even though there's a business case, it's not strong enough to get it to leapfrog above other things. So unless you're connected with the people that really are inside the political relationship power base of an organization, and the people that have genuine economic power, my view is that we're in trouble. And in B2B selling, if you hoovered up, all of the CRM data in the world and took a snapshot of all the deals in the forecast, not vague pipeline, but forecast deals, went back a year later and ran a big loss report on it all, depending on the industry, between 25% and a third of those deals that get lost to the customer staying in current state. So they just do nothing and the status quo prevails. And in the absence of a compelling event, because often there is no compelling event in B2B sales, what you need is a compelling business case and relationships with the people that can drive change. Otherwise, you've just got no chance.
Yeah, that's so important and so right on. So how do we help them develop that business case, Tony? What are some tips and some tactics that we can use to actually help build a compelling case so that we can sell that up?
Okay, so let me give a little bit of advice for the salespeople and sales leaders listening to this. The first thing is, whenever a lead comes to you, so whether it's a marketing lead, a lead in social, your inside sales function, BDR, ISR, SDR role has created a lead that they've handed off to you. Whenever you've got a lead, you need to ask the potential buyer, hey, what's happened inside your organization that's caused you to want to look at this right now? And unless the person answers that for you in a really engaging and meaningful way, I don't think you have a qualified prospect. So there's all of these qualification frameworks out there. The simplest one, the best known one is BANT, budget, authority, need, and timeline. But the reality is it's the degree to which they'll give you access to information and access to their people that determines whether you're going to win. It's not really just those things. So I would always ask that question. So often the buyer is in their tender evaluation mode. Hey, here's my spreadsheet with 1,342 questions on it I want you to fill out. Say, hey, look, absolutely, I respect your process and, I'll fill out your spreadsheet. But do you mind if I ask, what's happened internally that's caused you to think you even need a system like this? Or what's happened that's caused you to want to potentially change supplier? Because unless we get to root cause, the danger is they'll drag you through a process where they end up buying nothing. So that's really the first thing. The next thing we need to do, whether we're generating the opportunity or whether it's come to us, is we need to fairly shortly in the conversation ask them, hey, if you were to invest in change, what business results would you need to achieve? So, what results do you need to get if you're going to change the way you're doing things now? And if they go, well, why would you even need to know? Just answer my, 1,342 questions and give me your price. The answer is, well, hey, just the thing I'm aware of, I work with organizations all the time that are looking at this. And unless you have a strong business case behind what you're doing, unless you have clarity about what you need to achieve, the danger is you're going to get dragged through this process by management internally, and it's going to just be a waste of your time that actually damages your own brand. So let me help you build the business case and de-risk the initiative. I've spent a lot of time in the CRM industry. I work with I only work with one customer in any vertical at any one time, but I work with the biggest CRM company in the world, training their people. And, the thing I say to them is that unless the customer is clear about what they need to achieve and unless they've got a really strong business case, the danger is just nothing's going to happen. They're just going to stay in the world of spreadsheets and mess, because just because something's a problem doesn't mean that people are motivated to actually solve it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, right? It's it's so often about that real compelling need that and sometimes it's even what happens if this doesn't happen, right? What happens if we don't move ahead with this? Because it isn't always just about the outcome, it's also sometimes about the risk of crap. What if, are we going to go out of business because we didn't make this move, right? Are we, is our biggest competitor going to leapfrog us and therefore put us in a bad position that we may no longer be doing what we get to do or be in that leader position, or it might cost stock price or something like that. So I think that sometimes that other half, sometimes we forget about, or is the CEO going to lose face, right? I mean, sometimes ego can drive a decision fast.
Yeah, and Phil, you nailed the third question, right? Which is, when does this need to be in place by, and what happens if you end up not doing anything? Right. So those three questions are really, really important. All of the other qualification stuff just doesn't matter unless you nail those three questions.
Awesome. So real quick there, it's what happened that's causing you to look at the solution inside the organization. If you're to invest in change, what business results would you need to achieve? And when does this need in place by? And what happens if we do nothing? Those are really, really strong. So Tony, I'm curious though, those sound very simple. So why don't more sellers ask those three questions?
Well, there's people out there that say that the buyer is in control today. And I don't know whether I necessarily agree with that. I think buyers feel like, they've got more control, but the truth is they're overwhelmed and pretty confused with the process of trying to drink from the fire hose, when they go and do a Google search or have a look online. So I think buyers are only really truly in control if they reach out to their trusted network and create a short list and do it that way. But the reality for sellers is I find that sellers feel they've got to drive such a high level of cadenced activity that the quality of what they do is tending to fall away. And quantity kills quality. And if we know that, finding a warm introduction, finding a trigger event for context, doing your research, if we know that's important, and if you don't do that, you're not going to be successful. If we know that's true, what I see is that a lot of people just don't do it, and that's why they're failing. But on the other hand, you get people that try and boil the ocean with their level of research, and they never get the right level of activity to be successful. And that's where people need to be very definite in how they go to market. So the first thing is every seller, every business, every entrepreneur, CEO, everybody needs to think with a lot of clarity around product market fit and what defines my ideal customer profile. Because, selling is brutally tough anyway. Why make it nearly impossible by trying to sell something that does not have good product market fit or to people that aren't the ideal profile client for you? So really important to define product market fit, then ideal customer profile. And then as a subset of that, to define the buyer personas that you will need to engage with to go and be successful. Because for most people watching this or listening to this in selling, you're not just selling to one person. You're selling to multiple groups, not individuals, but multiple groups of stakeholders. The rise of consensus-based decision-making is very real. So even a type A head kicker personality kind of leader is still smart enough to know that they got to get people on board for the change program not to get sabotaged. So you need to know the buyer personas, and then sell, as part of ICP, also selling industry verticals. So if you do that, what should happen is you can create a baseline of value narrative that is pretty much on the mark, right? So for me and what I do, if I'm wanting to sell into the chief sales officer of software as a service businesses, I'm going to know that customer churn is an issue in those particular industries, that they'll have anywhere from 40 to 70% of their salespeople missing their numbers. They've got increased competition. They're going to find that forecasting is tough. So if I want to go drive a conversation with them, I can assume that that's pretty much a pretty strong baseline. I can then just do some simple pragmatic research, typically in LinkedIn and on the company's website. And within minutes, not hours, I'll be ready to make the call. And then if you're using, all of these awesomely incredible sales intelligence tools out there that'll give you email addresses, phone numbers, and all of the other things, the process of running outreach is not really that complicated. And the whole principle of combo is begin with the phone. People have neglected the phone. Actually call them. If they don't answer, and they typically won't, because their phone will ring and they'll look at it and go, this person's not in my address book, I'm not taking this. They'll let it go to voicemail. But leave a voicemail. Don't do your whole value narrative in the voicemail. Just say, hey Phil, it's Tony. I noticed and I've got some ideas on how you could. I'm going to shoot you an email. I'm looking forward to catching up for 20 minutes next week. Right? What happens is their phone goes ding and they go, oh, the person left a voicemail. They're having a listen to that voicemail. Then their phone goes ding and there's an email that came into their inbox. And what happens is the person in the back of their mind is thinking, wow, this person's determined. What they want to talk about is me and me getting better results. They were very crisp in what they said. They don't sound like a professional visitor and coffee drinker. I may as well have a quick conversation with them. And then what you do is sort of typically 4 days later, you run another combo at them. You phone, you voicemail, you email, but this time you add a text and maybe an in-mail in LinkedIn. So you just keep upping your game, until you're sending a carrier pigeon to them. You're sending them an old fax that turns up at reception. The receptionist has a heart attack when the dinosaur fax machine springs to life. And you just have a handwritten note on there, no company letterhead or anything. It ends up on the desk of the person. But you want the person thinking, holy crap, this person's determined. I may as well get back to them because they're not going to go away. And the way you want to feel as a seller is never, ever, ever, ever confuse being ignored with being rejected. You just keep going till you get a valid no. You love no's, because when you get a valid no, now you're not going to be wasting any more of your time or annoying anybody else, and you're not living in false hope about anything.
So getting a no is important, right? Don't fear rejection, because often you're just getting ignored. I think that's key, and don't look like every other salesperson. I think those are some big lessons there, Tony.
That's true.
So if you read Stu Heinek's book about Get a Meeting with Anyone, where he talks about having something so personal that it just
like a cartoon,
right? Like a cartoon. That's right.
I have.
So I mean, what do you think about that? Is that a way to maybe shortcut the combo, or should that be included?
It should be included. Go ahead and be creative. But here's the reality: if you're a seller, you've got to drive a high level of activity if you want to make it. So if you're an inside sales rep, my view is you've got to be doing 30 to 50 outbound combos a day. If you're an AE, a BDM, a field salesperson, where maybe 20% to 40% of your number will come from leads that you get given, and the rest of it you got to go find yourself. You're going to be your own ISR, BDR inside salesperson. My view is you've got to be doing 2 hours of outbound prospecting a day, right? And you've got to time block it. And you should be doing it in the shoulders of the day. If you're going at senior people, if you're selling into the C-suite, in my view, from 7:45 in the morning till about 9 a.m., you should be in the office by 7:15 in the morning, having 3 coffees and 2 Red Bull chasers, and then get on the phone by 7:45, calling people. Senior people don't object to you calling them while they're driving into the office. If they're on public transport coming into the office, they just won't take the call. They're not offended that you called them, right? But they'll listen to your voicemail and they'll read the email. because the average person gets about 120 emails a day. So all they do is they just skim down the list on their mobile device and go delete, 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 or just ignore everything until they find a name of someone they know or something that looks relevant. So you've got to drive a couple of hours of outbound every day. So I'll be doing an hour first thing in the morning, and then ideally, do another hour at the end of the day, but certainly never leave the office and go home ever until you've got a call list for yourself for the next morning, right? So you don't want to be turning up to the office wondering what you're going to do to build pipeline. You want to turn up to the office and execute, so that when all of the snoozers turn up that work with you at about 9:15 in the morning, check their email, gaze at themselves narcissistically in LinkedIn, then go and get a coffee and have breakfast with their friends and have a laugh, and then are feeling guilty at about 10:30 in the morning they've done nothing, right? The truth is, when those people turn up to the office, you've already done what they failed to achieve in an entire week.
Awesome. So drink your coffee, but get in early, get started. And I love your suggestion at the end of the day, prep for the following day, right? Like, get your list together so you don't have to stress first thing in the morning, so you know what you're doing. I would also say that gives you time then to practice on your drive in as you're stuck in traffic, on transit, to listen to yourself and work on that story, because now you have time and who you're talking to.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Tony, there's got to be some downside though. Like, what's the downside of combo prospecting? And don't tell me that you get too much of a pipeline. Like, what's a downside? Why would somebody not? Why would they say, you know what, Tony, this sounds great, but I'm not sold, man. Like, why would I not want to do this? Because this sounds pretty obviously like a winner to me.
It is. Look, it is a winner. I get in-mails every single week. I would get probably 6 in-mails a week from people saying, I read the book. I was skeptical about texting people. The biggest reluctance I get from people when I because I only run my program for big corporates. When I run the program, there'll always be a few people saying, really? You can text people? Don't some people get really upset when you send them an SMS text message on their phone? And I say, no, try it. You'll be blown away, right? So the reality is there is not one, well, maybe there is one or two, I don't know, but I've never met anyone. I've never met anyone that has more than enough sales pipeline consistently. They might have more than enough this month. They don't have more than enough for the year. Everyone needs 3 to 5 times pipeline coverage against their sales target. It's the way you take the stress out of selling. It just honestly is. So everybody needs more pipeline, and combo prospecting is the way you go get it. You make sure you nail your narrative, you target people effectively, and you use combinations of channels to break through, and you run it all concurrently. So what you do not do is send an email and then a day later you phone and then you leave a voicemail the first time, but then you never leave another voicemail because you don't want to be desperate, and then you just send emails, sort of once a week. All of that is loser strategy, right? You've got to think, I believe in the value of what I do. So, because the way I feel, if I'm talking to a head of sales, I feel like I am going to save their career, their marriage, their finances. I'm going to help them to prevent getting fired. The most least secure person sitting around the boardroom table with the CEO of the company every week, when that CEO's got their leadership team around the table, the least secure person is the head of sales. The average tenure for a head of sales is less than 2 years. The next least secure person is the head of marketing. And my view is, how the hell do you get to sleep at night if you know that you've got the majority of your people missing their number? If you know you're handing a forecast up the line that your boss doesn't believe? If you know that your people don't have enough pipeline coverage, if you know that they're not executing sales process properly, if you know that they're having rubbish conversations with people that are giving them no traction, if you know they're turning up to meetings without an agenda and they don't create progression, they just keep revisiting, how do you even sleep at night? So don't tell me you're too busy or you don't have time, right? Give me 20 minutes. Let's talk about how you can get your career under control and be successful. Now, that's very arrogant, right? I don't say that, but that's how I feel. And, I don't know what it is that you listening to this podcast or watching this sell yourself, but you need to get very clear, what problem do I solve? Why is it important? And what better results do people get that work with me? And go and have conversations about that, not about you and what you do. So One of the big mistakes most salespeople make is they talk about themselves and their attributes rather than talking about the customer and the customer's opportunity for better results.
Love that. Great reminder to focus and stay focused on your customers' needs and the value that you can provide them, and not about your company. Nobody gives a crap about your company or about you until they see that you can fix what they need fixed. So I think that's absolutely fantastic, Tony. So if people were going to get connected with you and we're going to maybe ask you some questions, because you've got, I mean, the book is fantastic. Some of the stuff in here, you've got about 80-20, the 80-20 rule, about building your brand, about talking about your story, all sorts of good stuff in there. But there's lots of questions. So first, folks, go and get the book, right? Get Combo Prospecting, and then come back and ask some really insightful questions of Tony. But Tony, if people were going to do that, where would you send them? How could they get connected with you? How could they learn even a little more from you before they were going to ask those insightful questions?
Yeah, so I share everything I know in LinkedIn. So I'm more than happy to share my IP freely. So if you follow me in LinkedIn and feel free to connect with me, I'm a node in the network, as LinkedIn actually described me. So if you're on LinkedIn free, you want to connect to nodes in the network because it opens up LinkedIn when you run your own search. So connect with me in LinkedIn. My speaker website is tonyhughes.com.au. And my sales methodology website is rsvpselling.com. And I'm also part of Sales IQ, which is a sales enablement platform. So a lot of my IP is going to end up there with Sales IQ. So yeah, and if you just Google me, you'll certainly find plenty of content. I've got over 100 YouTube videos that are available as well.
Awesome. Such great stuff. So thank you, Tony, so much for sharing. Thank you so much for writing this great book, right? So folks, if you're thinking you need to go get a sales book that's actually going to help you prospect, fill your pipeline, and actually make a difference in those you sell to, this is the book. It's Combo Prospecting, the powerful 1-2 punch that fills your pipeline and wins sales. Great book. RSVP Selling for Tony. Look for Tony J. Hughes on LinkedIn. Check him out. Thanks so much for staying with us, folks. Have a great night. I hope you solve lots more important problems. See you soon.